Yo, it's Real Suncar Hours. Real Suncar Hours. Follow us at Suncar Hours on Twitter. We're recording this episode on June 17th, 2020, Wednesday. And it's a free episode. We're a Black leftist podcast, and for those of you who are listening to this for free, we encourage you to subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/RealSunCarHours. $5 a month, you get bonus episodes, a lot of good stuff, theory readings, additional interviews. Our last interview we did with an activist in Seattle about the autonomous zone in Seattle. So that is behind a paywall. So subscribe, support independent Black media. We have a special guest here today, and we're going to be talking about OpSec and a bunch of other stuff. I'm Adam Hudson. Follow me at AdamHudson5 on Twitter.
This is Peter M. Gunn. Follow me at MGunnPeter. And joining us, we have Tron from Columbus. Why don't you introduce yourself?
What's up, everybody? My name is Tron. I behind the page of Activist Arts. So it's Activist Plus Arts on Twitter. It's Activist Plus Arts on IG. YouTube account is kind of like dormant. YouTube is really annoying. So I kind of upload as much to YouTube. But Instagram is popping right now. Twitter's popping. And so Activist Plus Arts. Check me out there and what's happening in Columbus. And happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, yeah, so before we begin, I just want to talk about this really just tragic death that happened not too long ago. A 19-year-old Black Lives Matter activist, her name was Oluwatoyin Salau. She was found dead in Tallahassee, Florida on Monday, so a couple days before this recording. And yeah, she was a very outspoken Black Lives Matter activist, very fierce freedom fighter, and it's just this story is just like just fucked up on all levels. She basically described being essentially followed and sexually assaulted by a man on Twitter, and so that's what just makes it even more just disturbing to hear about. And so she was found dead in Tallahassee. She was sexually assaulted and murdered by this man. So he's been arrested and charged. This guy, Aaron Glee Jr., who's a 49-year-old Black man who's been charged with murder and kidnapping. Apparently, he murdered another woman who's Victoria Sims, who's 75 years old and an AARP volunteer. So from what I've heard, like, this guy is basically just a predator, and a lot of people have been feeling, rightly very upset and angry, and this is just, we have to find a way to just make Black activist spaces safe for all Black people, Black women, Black trans folks, Black queers, and especially as a straight cisgender Black man, I just want to say that, and just give like a message of solidarity to Toyin and other people within the Black community who are living in very, very precarious conditions, because she was also, from what I understand, like, she lived in an abusive family. So I think her housing situation was also very precarious as well, which is, I think, why, like, she, I guess, crossed paths with this man, because I guess, like, this man who was saying, like, he could help her out with housing or something like that. But anyway, it's just fucked up all around. That guy is scum. I no love for him at all. Rest in peace, Toyin. She did not deserve to go out like this. And I just wanted to just get that off my chest, and just, I think we have to, actually have some security protocols and practices to make the movement safe for all Black folks, and strengthen community bonds, so we can prevent this sort of thing from happening. So anyway, rest in peace, Toyin. You did not deserve to go out like this. And anyway, that's what I have to say on that. I just wanted to mention it because it's very recent news, but also just very tragic. So
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of that. You know, to the degree to which we haven't sort of talked about those issues, you know, on this podcast, it's not that we were ever not going to. It's just, you know, there are a lot of things to talk about. But next week, you know, sort of the call of, you know, black men needing to, you know, to talk about this stuff for themselves is something that we've definitely heard. And next week, we will be getting into it more in depth. So
Yeah.
we just wanted to provide, you know, a shout out and recognition, you know, this week as, you know, this story develops, because it is all part of the same system. It's all part of a system of anti-blackness that sees black lives as, you know, killable, as sort of not null and void. And that is, you know, why the movement exists. That's why it's called what it's called, and all that stuff. So sorry to start off on downer, but these are downer times. But as you alluded to, Adam, part of the problem is, you know, developing protocols such that activists can, you know, and organizers can keep each other safe, because this is dangerous work, and it is work that is being suppressed by the state, you know, actively. And that's why we have our friend Tron here to, you know, this is more on the digital end, I believe, but to get into some of sort of the basics of, you know, how to, I guess, document, you know, protests and sort of express oneself online in a way that at least, you know, doesn't leave yourself as like an open target. So I don't know where you want to start with it, but
you want me to talk about what's been going on, like, just on the ground in Columbus as far as protesty stuff?
That's true.
Or then,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. No problem. Thank you for sharing that, for starting the show with that too, Adam. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So pretty much, yeah, I've been in Columbus pretty much forever, and really got into activism after college. Came back to the city, and been protesting and working around police brutality for a while now. And so on a positive side, I'm really excited to see Columbus show out. I've never seen this before my entire time doing activism here. On the negative side, I'm fucking tired of this shit. Like, I just want to like go home on a fucking ranch. Like, what's that guy's name from Avengers? The purple dude. What's his, Thanos? Yeah, I just want to do a full Thanos and just go on some fucking farm and just like pick fruit or some shit. Cause I'm like fucking like, you know, I'm just tired of this shit. But
yeah.
On the positive side, it's great. So I mean, we talked about in our little pre-conversation about Gen Z. And so I'll back up a little bit and I'll talk about what happened immediately after George Floyd here in Columbus. So immediately after George Floyd, there was a man in a black neighborhood on Livingston Avenue here in Columbus, and he was protesting the police. It was him, a woman, and I think 2 younger teens. But he's out there with a sign, and he's pissed. Like, he's just saying, "Fuck you, fuck the police." His sign in like big blue letters says "fuck the police," and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, "Fuck the police." So he's on the corner. He's not in the street, anything like that. He'll go in the street a little bit and then he'll come back on the sidewalk. So anyway, he's pissed off. And there's a cop across the street at a mental health service building, and he's just watching him. And so after this goes on, and then the guy's protesting, the cop approaches him, he confronts him, and then the cop just starts manhandling him. Then they get into an altercation, and then of course 50 cops show up, and the guy's pissed off. He doesn't want to be detained. They're detaining him. They're holding him by force. And eventually they arrest this guy, and it blows up on social media, and then the whole neighborhood comes out to protest. And meanwhile, so this happens the day before Thursday, which is when the protests kicked off citywide downtown. And so the next day, people come back. Now it's a lot of white folks. Mostly it was like a lot of the black neighborhood was there. The next day, everyone came out. A lot of white folks came to support and solidarity. So they're holding the black neighborhood down on this block. They take the street. We have some confrontations with the police, but nothing too serious. Everyone gets away unscathed. No chemical weapons or anything like that gets fired. Meanwhile, downtown, that's where you have thousands of people, and they're getting blocked by the police, and they can't move. So I'm at the protest at Livingston for a while, and then I'm also volunteer with the street medics here, Cosmic, here in Columbus. So I work with them from time to time. And we were there. They were also there at the protest downtown. So after we left the first protest in Livingston, we went downtown to go check that out and see what was going on. And pretty much when I got there, the crowd was at a standstill. The police were occasionally macing people like every 45 minutes. And the crowd was getting more agitated. People started throwing more shit at the cops. And the cops just kept macing people. And then someone had the genius idea of just start smashing shit. And so what I was saying earlier about like Gen Z, it was amazing to see so many young people like at this protest. You know, being a activist here and at other protests, you don't usually see too many types of people, too many different groups and classes all together at once. And that was different. Like you had young people, you had people who were outcast by the system, people I knew personally who never went to a protest before like this. And so you had like a crazy mix of people and the energy was so fucking high. And it's like you had a lot of second generation students too, of African descent, Somali and stuff like that. And they weren't taking shit. Like they were ready. And it was great to see that level of energy. And I watched like the people run up to the State House and confront it and breach it and all that kind of shit. And it was scary because it was like, is this Columbus? Like, I can't believe this. It's like people usually like we get maced and we go home. That's usually what happens. Yeah. And that didn't happen. People kept getting shot. They kept getting maced and they just kept going at it. And so, and that pretty much kind of kicked off the rest of the protest. And it was like that as far as like property damage and all that kind of shit. Like I'm not here to talk about that. I support that shit because that's the only way to get the people to pay attention, in a nutshell. But, you know, it's like property damage doesn't happen if the police actually behave. If the police did their job and actually respected protesters, there wouldn't be any property damage.
Yeah.
But that didn't last too long in the city. It was great to see ACAB spray painted everywhere. Fuck 12 was spray painted everywhere. It was like, I don't know, it was like a dream to see all this fucking pent-up rage just unleashed. Yeah, on this gentrified area, you know, and if you don't know a lot about Columbus and its history, I mean, it's pretty corrupt. It's a well-maintained corrupt political system. There's been a lot of gentrification here. There's been a lot of tax abatements and defunding of services here, and a lot of wealth has been transferred to the property owners and the property owning class here, and the wealth, you know, the elite class here in Columbus. So anyway, it was great to see this protected zone, you know, get its due, because for so long people say, oh, black people are so stupid because they burn down their own community. Well, when we come to your place of work, now you want to get upset. Now you want to say, oh, why don't you burn down the black neighborhood, you know? Wow. But it was what are you gonna say?
If you're talking about the short north, right, I mean, that was a black
that happened too. Yeah, it was.
And it started out a black neighborhood, and then, you know, sort of intense like policing, you know, the gentrification shock troop style of policing kind of, you know, made it into like the arts district, and then it you know graduated from being the arts district into basically just like all hotels and just like corporate chains, and it's, you know, the last stage of gentrification where it's like not even for like people in the city. It's
exactly,
it's and that's when for real estate.
And that's so that's so funny you say that, because I stopped going there about 4 years ago because the clientele, the people, well, like I said, a lot of the arts was gone. A lot of the weird, quirky businesses that were there couldn't afford rent anymore. They were gone. So now you're left with a bunch of chains, overpriced places, and then you had the suburban crowd coming there, because it used to be, you know, a lot of us in our generation, we were there. It was a cool kind of artsy place. And now it's pretty much the suburban mom place and the bro Buckeye place. And I had an artist friend. He tried to break up a fight. It's a black man, older black man. He broke up a fight between two white guys. A guy came back, broke a bottle, and stabbed this guy in the eye. He's permanently blind now, but he was an artist and he sold his art on High Street. And now he's permanently blind.
Wow.
And that's the kind of fucking people who are down there now. And I even talked to business owners who've been down there a couple years, and they just talked about how much that place has changed. And they don't like the people who shop there, and the people aren't. It's funny to hear that. Like you have white people complaining about the types of white people that come down to the short north, because it's like this arrogance, like all this kind of stuff that are, you know, dangerous. So anyway, that's another side story. Yeah, so Short North has pretty much become a shitty wasteland, and I'm glad to see some of that shit get hit too. Anyway, so long story short, that stuff happens, and then things kind of took a turn over the weekend when you had a couple of prominent politicians come downtown, and it was like this whole thing about peaceful protesting, and we're going to be peaceful, and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, people were peaceful, and can anybody guess what happened? Anyone guess?
I know what happened.
Oh, go ahead, Peter. Go ahead and tell us what happened.
Maced. I mean, it's very funny because the 3rd congressional district, which is where I grew up, I guess technically, at least where that house is now, is represented by Joyce Beatty, who is like, you know, one of those kind of long-standing machine politicians,
right?
And she was like facing a primary challenge that I don't, you know, obviously I wasn't in Columbus, but I was following it, and it seemed like it had some legs until COVID happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Right. So that didn't happen, but then she went, you know, they ended up macing her at the protest. So it was just like even someone who's like supposed to be like upholding the system and everything, it was still like who's been doing the, you know, the job of the bourgeoisie is still got maced. It was
right.
Like,
all black politicians, they all got maced at this thing. It was Kevin Boyce, Joyce Beatty, and City Council President Shannon Hardin.
When I think about it, was probably intentional. I mean, I'm sure the cops knew who they were. Like seeing some of the behavior that the cops have done, like when they target, you know, fucking 9-year-old girls or whatever. I mean, it's not like they didn't know that they were there. It was like, yes, the point is terrorism.
Right. And so they got maced at this so-called peaceful protest. And I think that kind of changed the tide as far as like getting at least a little bit of political leadership acknowledging that this is a serious problem and it's not just a protester problem, that it is actually the police. And, you know, I don't want to go into a whole litany of things that the Columbus police have done, but basically in a nutshell, Columbus police have shot a lot of people unjustly, a lot of black people unjustly, and done a lot of crazy shit. You can do a Google search, you've been under a federal investigation, all that kind of stuff. But the city is like a snake. The department is like a snake. They slither and they're able to, you know, shake off all this oversight and things like that. So that kind of like was a nice little turning point. And then since then, I've been at a lot of rallies. I haven't been as much down there as much these past 2 weeks, or this past week, I should say. I try to go on the weekends. But when I was there a few weeks ago, this new group of people came in and they've been kind of watering down the message and all this kind of stuff. And I don't want to mention their names. I made a post about it on Activist Arts, but it's like COINTEL-ish group kind of came in and tried to take charge of the movement. And these people have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Their demands don't make any sense. And they came out of nowhere. No activist in the city knows who they are. And they're getting meetings. They were getting private meetings with the police department and all this kind of stuff. So all of it was very suspicious. And the media was giving them credit. The media was saying that they're the ones who are leaders and they're the ones who help quell the violence at the protests, which is complete bullshit. You know, there was only property destruction at like 2 nights of it. And that's because the police didn't give a fuck. Like, if they wanted to protect property, they could have, but they didn't care to do that. So that's why.
And that's their only job too.
Right. Yeah. And they don't do that. So that's been going on, and like the activist community has been getting together and putting statements out and stopping that shit down. And there's been a lot of great marches here. There was a march last Friday. There was a march last Friday. There'll be another march this Friday of the mothers of victims of police violence. So we had a couple mothers march. They got together, and it was a really successful march. And you just have a lot of different groups of people down there. And I'm kind of worried. Now you're having like the conservative black people coming out now, which is very worrying. So I'm watching this very closely to make sure it doesn't become a Sunday church service, which on some cases it has, which is not good, because then it's like hand holding all this kind of shit, and then nothing ever gets done. Yeah. So the good news is that, you know, people are still showing up. People are still being downtown. I mean, last weekend was like a block party, Friday night and Saturday night. I don't know if people are still showing up during the daytime every day like they were the first 2 weeks, but at least in the weekends, there's a lot of marches, a lot of different groups are coming down, and people are still downtown. The good news is that the police have completely shifted their tactics. They've been told to stand down. So in the first couple nights of the protest, the police would not let people take the street. And understand this. People could say, well, you have to obey the law. You can't take the street. But listen, if you have 3,000, 5,000 people downtown in one area,
sidewalk.
You can't put them on the sidewalk. They have to take the street. Like, it's just common sense. So anyway, that was like the big contention there. Is like, you step in the street, police lose their shit, and they start shooting it at you or whatever. And now they just been, it's like a demilitarized zone. They're just gone. So like, we haven't seen them around. Well, at least when I was down there, I haven't seen them around a lot. They'll drive around the perimeter and stuff like that. Especially when the National Guard was there, didn't see a lot of cops. And guess what happened? Not a lot of crazy shit's been popping off since then. And so that's probably been really eye-opening, is that I think the police department has kind of seen that they are the problem. At least that's what I get when I watch. Nothing bad happen when they're not there, right?
Or DeWine got him on a call and was just like, guys, can't.
And also, there's also evidence. I mean, I feel like anyone who pays attention to police violence, this is not new to them. But there's an article in Huffington Post that states implicit bias trainings don't actually change police behavior.
Of course not.
Yeah. So this is referring to a case. I think I mentioned it before, but Derek Sanderland, he is a 27-year-old community organizer in San Jose, California, and he was apparently one of the people who did these implicit bias trainings, and he was shot in the groin with a rubber bullet at one of the at a protest. So it seems like there's this growing awareness that no matter how many anti-bias trainings and body cams, the problem is the institution of the police. Like, they're the problem.
And the system they exist to uphold.
Exactly.
And this is why I've been trying to advocate and educate as much as I can about abolition, and trying to do rallies, trying to do a teach-in right now about abolition. We'll see if you can get that organized pretty soon. But so abolition is the only way to go. And that can be a whole other discussion, but pretty much you can do as many trainings as you want. It comes down to, we just have to hit the reset button. We have to start over and it's not just policing, it's public safety. Like, the idea of keeping the public safe, what does that actually entail? And that's the question that we should be asking. Not so much what's the new police force going to be. It's what does public safety look like, or proper public safety look like?
I agree. Totally agree. Yeah. 100%.
And that's pretty much what's been going on here. I try to go down there as often as I can, but being at so many protests and being brutalized at so many different protests, it's like, it's kind of a weird, it could be a whole other topic as far as burnout and then past trauma and all this kind of stuff. So I do go, but I don't try to go there as much as possible. I'm doing a lot of stuff at home and going down there to help when I feel like it. So it's just kind of, just balancing out those two.
Yeah, I as some of you guys might know, I'm a freelance journalist, and I've been doing it for since 2012, for a long time, and a lot of my writing is about police violence. I've been to a lot of protests and meetings and seen how the sausage is made, so to speak. And also
heard all the woke police chief speeches.
Yeah, I've heard, I've just been around that stuff, and also just I've talked to too many black and brown mothers who've had to bury their children who were murdered by the police. So I've had to confront Black Death, and also deal with my own share of racial profiling and stuff like that. So it's like, not just writing about it, but it's like I'm also a character in this story of black suffering that I'm writing. And it is true. I think you're right, Tron, that it can lead to burnout, and sometimes you have to just give yourself some space to not because you get to a point where it's like, we already know what the problem is. We've been saying this for a long time, and no amount of woke book lists is going to fix the problem. You know what I mean? It's it doesn't matter how many times you read, Ibram Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist, or Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, and all this other stuff. It's like, the problem's obvious. It's the real thing is okay, what do we do about it? Because we already know what the problem is. at least those of us who've been involved in this shit for a long time and have seen it up front, it's obvious.
Yeah, and I trying to get myself just prepared for the long haul, because as we talk about cybersecurity and all that kind of OpSec stuff, and even just self-defense, it's like there's only two options, which is really hunker down or get ready to leave the country, because I mean all avenues to change have been shut down. I mean, we talked about Joyce Beatty's Challenger and COVID and the election and the whole Trump trying to shut down mailing. I mean all this. So I don't even know where to start. It's just like any avenue that can actually change, we're seeing crazy barriers, very high barriers too. And so it's like we're really going to have to really fuck shit up for the next couple months or years to get the elites to back down, or at least to get some control over parts of the system.
Yeah.
And they're not in a position where they feel like they have to give us anything, because
exactly.
Yeah.
There's no threat to capitalism on a geopolitical stage, and if anything, they think, like American workers have had it too easy, and
right.
And I mean, straight up, like talking about the Midwest, especially, where like it is like, the Midwest is getting pitched to Chinese firms for investment and stuff, and that's a whole other situation. But it's important to understand that like even the degree to which like the American workforce has been bought off by imperial super profits, that payoff is going to become less and less, and the distance between the first and third world, let's say, not that Black America is a first world country, because it isn't, but that that distance, that sense of like America as like having it good is it's going to get smaller. And so, people, you gotta have the long view for this stuff, because there's no way anything is going to get better until we make it better.
And I want to emphasize a point Peter just made, because I think it's really important that, if Black America were its own country, it wouldn't be like on the level, like it would not be a first world country in terms of like economic development, GDP, and all that. So, so we have to think about like what's in it, for a long haul for Black America. And also, the reason why I brought this up is because I think there is always this assumption that Black America would be able to reap the benefits of the American project. But I think what's becoming more and more abundantly clear is that, that we were never intended to reap the benefits of America, despite being kidnapped from Africa and brought here as slave labor. Yeah. Right? Like that was never part of the deal during slavery. It's like, no, you come here and work, but we're not going to give you the benefits of this thing called America. Even though like you helped build the economic foundation of the country, you're not supposed to benefit from this. So at some point, like, I think with these protests, hopefully it's becoming a lot more clear to people that like, okay, you can try to integrate all you want, but like the system's not designed to give you equal economic spoils, because that was never part of the contract that was signed between white American society and Black America. It was never part of the deal. So the question is, what does Black America do for going from here?
Right. And there was a real quick story, but I was listening to a podcast on NPR. It was a Fresh Air interview about the Chicago 1919 riots. And I think one of the recommendations from this white group was that we should just let the Negroes die out, and that'll solve the race problem, and that will prevent future riots. Like that was their actual suggestion. And it's like that's been, I think, the official plan of action for white people for the past couple hundred years, which is just let the Negro die out, and then we won't have to worry about the race problem anymore. It'll solve itself.
Yeah. Problem is, or not, we don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think because there's people who want that, but then there's also the projection of America as like the e pluribus unum and democracy and all that. So it's like, how do you? It's going to be hard for America to say to the world that like, yeah, we believe in democracy and we're all one, but like we have this problem when it comes to Black people, and our solution is just to kill them. it's going to be hard to like at least in terms of legitimacy, like the system's legitimacy is going to be like you can't say that out in the open is my point. They can't. Some people do. But.
It may just not matter because I mean, whatever kind of Cold War shit we're trying to bring back up with China, I mean, the ideological argument really is, and whatever people think about China, I know we're getting sidetracked, but I think this is a good discussion. Whatever people think about China, I mean, they aren't really making like there isn't like an ideological geopolitical battle being waged between the United States and China. And so,
that's true.
You know, the only reason you could get the bourgeoisie back in the 50s and 60s to get on board with like civil rights in many ways was because it was like such, you know, great propaganda for the Soviet Union, and it was like as the Soviet Union, you know, was assisting in anti-colonial struggles in Africa, it was like, hey, check out, you know, the American Empire, and this is what they do to black people. And, you know, there isn't even that buy-in. I mean, there's no reason for, you know, the bourgeoisie they don't have any compelling interest to give an inch right now, is what I think people have to understand.
So Tron, what would be your advice, I guess, when it comes to, I guess, basic sort of, I guess, like OpSec when it comes to this kind of activism? Like, what do you think works?
I think, where did I start? It's so funny because when I was first asked about OpSec, it's something I've been doing for a while, but on a limited basis. But I was like, what is OpSec? And I was like, oh, so I had to go Google that. And I was like, oh, okay, I actually understand what all this stuff is. I've been doing it for a while. It's just kind of funny. But it's like operational security. You know, what are some things that we can do to keep ourselves safe online? And for the full disclaimer, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. Kind of a hobbyist. I really decided to turn my channel, my platform, my social media platform into kind of I'm really into art and really into activism. So that's why Activist Plus Arts. But I also want to turn it into like a kind of a cybersecurity kind of OpSec kind of portal for activists to disseminate information. So I've been slowly doing research on a couple things when I have time to do them, and then kind of just releasing it out to my friends and stuff like that about what to do, what to use and what not to use. And so basically just trying to say that I'm not an expert. If I say some shit wrong, you know, don't hold me too guilty. I'm trying. Okay. But basically I got a few things that we can talk about now. And it's like, being in this work for a while and like speaking, calling people out and things like that. And then just being outspoken in general comes with risk. And just like you said with Toyin earlier with the example that, she was stalked on social media, and just putting yourself on social media in any capacity puts yourself at risk especially when you're challenging the system or anything like that. You know, this stuff is real, and it's like your online life can definitely intersect with your real life. So you just need to be really need to be careful. And it kind of hit home with me just going out through my life, is I've kind of had like mini doxes. So like we talk about doxing, you know, getting exposed online and stuff like that. So I'll tell a couple quick stories of my experience. It's like one of them, really kind of harmless, was like as someone who used to be an educator, I worked at middle school, and all these kids would do is Google your name, and then they would show you what they found on Google. And this is stuff that I had no control over as far as like what was on the internet. So like they were pulling up stuff in college, like good things I did in college, right? So nothing harmful, but still it's creepy to see this kid pull up pictures and say, is this you? Oh, and then read all this stuff and ask you a whole bunch of questions. And so from just understanding that everything you do in your life is documented online and it's going to stay there forever. And a lot of this stuff may not be under your control. And so when we talk about OpSec, you always want to be careful about putting your real name out there and what you want linked to you, and even giving media interviews to the media about what you're doing and things like that, because it can all come back. So that's kind of a harmless example, is just having a bunch of young people Google you, and it's really annoying, you know, them trying to figure out your interests and all that kind of stuff. And they could just ask you questions that you would answer, but no, they'll Google you and right in front of you while you're trying to teach a lesson, and then ask a million questions about what they found online. And it's really creepy. So there's that part of it. Another situation was I made this spoof of a certain project of a group that I really didn't like. This was like a corporate conservative group that's kind of corrupt here in the city. I made a spoof of their media project, and pretty much their law firm doxed me because I was just pretty sloppy the way I posted it. And they linked, did a Google search and it linked back to who my identity was. And so I got a cease and desist order from a law firm to stop disseminating this project, this parody that I made. And I was like, damn, I really got to take this shit seriously. So that was a big wake up call that, could have gotten sued for putting this project out. And it was pretty popular too. So it was getting a lot of shares and a lot of follows, and had to shut it down. And I think, was there one more story about that? There probably is. Oh yeah. Another situation was just like back in college, I had a Twitter account, but of course this Twitter account wasn't tied to my real identity, but I pissed somebody off and they went on a whole tirade about my account and stuff like that. And that could have been damaging if I linked it to my real name and things like that. And then even like back in high school, I did stand-up comedy, and like I wasn't that funny, but it was fun to do. So even thinking about telling the jokes that I used to tell back then before I became woke, they'd be very inappropriate today. And it's kind of jokes that it's material that I definitely don't want out there now. But even thinking about this, I made sure to delete that stuff a long time ago. So basically all these kind of stories just kind of remind you that, everything that we do that ends up online is going to be there permanently. And so we really just need to think twice when we post stuff that's hanging around that we need to delete. We should get rid of it. Stuff that's hanging around on your computer that you forgot about, that may be incriminating or looks terrible, you should delete it. Get rid of all that stuff. So I'll talk about a couple things. I don't even know where you want me to start. Like talk about browsing or like just being an activist and stuff like that. What do you want?
I think maybe you want to talk about like VPNs and what a VPN is and why you should think about using one.
Yeah, so a VPN, everyone should get one right now. The sad part is that a good VPN is going to cost you money. But the good news is that with a VPN, so VPN is a virtual private network. It basically encrypts the data that you're sending through the internet. And so encryption just means that it's using mathematical problems and algorithms to basically code the messages that you're sending. And to crack those codes would take a very, very, very long time, if not be impossible. So you're having very strong encryption. And the also good thing is that it hides your location. And so when we talk about searching the internet with your phone and with your computer, having your information given or revealed can get you doxxed. Someone can figure out your true identity by getting your location. So basically, everyone has an IP address when they connect to the internet through their laptop and even through phones, but that's a different story because mobile networks work differently. But for right now, let's just focus on computers. So when you connect your laptop or device to Wi-Fi, you're giving an IP address, which is basically your address for how people can find you. And so what a VPN does is that it gives a fake IP address. So it kind of like tricks the server. All the information goes to the provider, the VPN server. And so it's telling your internet provider like Spectrum or WoW or those people that, hey, you're not really in Columbus, Ohio. You're really in Canada, or you're in Las Vegas or California. And so that's important is because number one, your data is encrypted. So the third parties, the trackers, the Google, all the stuff that tracks you to sell you stuff and to sell your data has a much harder time doing that. And people can't figure out where you really are when you have that VPN. So as I said before, VPNs, the negative downside is that they're expensive. Not really expensive, I shouldn't say that, but they cost money, a good one. And you shouldn't use a free one because we actually don't know. It's just less secure. And we don't know if they're actually protecting your stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So the good thing about VPNs is that usually when you buy one, you get like 5 licenses. So, excuse me, I got to like burp, but it's not coming out. All right, there we go. So anyway, VPN, you get like a couple licenses with it. And I've been using NordVPN just because it was pretty cheap for what I got. I paid like $80, but I kept it for 2 years, 2 or 3 years, I think. I have to check the license, but it might have been 3 years. So anyway, it's not too bad. It's like a couple bucks a month over that time span. But I get a couple licenses so I can give those out to people. Or you could have maybe 5 people all chip in and pay that $80, and then you're protected for 2 to 3 years, depending on the license. So, using VPN as much as possible. And also when you get Nord, you can use it for your phones as well. So you've got the phone encryption and you've got stuff for your laptop, which is good. So speaking of VPNs, it's just like, by this point, everyone should have one because the internet has become so monetized now. And it's so easy to figure out who you are just by having your IP address. So if you're doing activist work, especially, even if you're just an average person, it can be kind of annoying to have your stuff being followed and tracked all the time. I don't know if you ever noticed this, like when you Google something and it shows up on your Instagram ads or anything like that, or you Google something and then you're on another website and then the ad pops up for what you searched for. So all that stuff comes through when you don't have a VPN. These third parties are reading your data traffic and they're basically packaging up and selling it off to these advertisers. And so with a VPN on, you're kind of stopping that in its tracks. And I like that. So you kind of see the real world effects of what happens when you use a VPN. Another benefit of having a VPN is like Netflix. So let's say I want to watch some shit that's illegal for me to watch in the United States. And when I say illegal, it's like, you have licensing deals that these movie studios have and stuff like that. So basically, there's certain stuff that I can watch in France that I can't watch in the United States. But with a VPN, I can fake my location, say I'm in France, and then watch stuff that's only for a French audience or a Mexican audience. So I've been able to watch the Michael Jordan documentary that was on Netflix. It was only on Netflix outside of the United States because of licensing deals and Disney and all that kind of garbage. But with the VPN, I was able to watch it, had a good time. And so it's another benefit of that. Yeah.
I wanted to say that, there was a period when I watched Al Jazeera English all the time, and it was when they were trying to launch Al Jazeera America, they took Al Jazeera English off of the American internet. So yeah, I had to get a VPN. I had to do a VPN to pretend I was from England and to be able to watch Al Jazeera. And I think if you want to watch a Canadian broadcasting company documentary or something like that, they are also good for that.
Right. And I think another situation or another part of that is also using an onion router or Tor. And they kind of both protect they both protect you online, but in different ways. And so let's say that you can't really afford a VPN. But then the second option I would suggest you is to use a Tor browser. And so basically it hides your identity like a VPN, but it does it in a different way. And so basically how I explain this is it's called an onion router because it has several different layers. So there's several different layers of encryption, and your location bounces randomly around a bunch of different people's locations that are hosting Tor, if that makes any sense. So the negative side about this is that your internet traffic is going to be really slow. And because your traffic is bouncing around to a bunch of random locations under multiple layers of encryption, some websites just won't work really well. Another thing is that so Tor started out as a project of the Navy, and so it's not this government platform that just wide open to the government. However, because it was created by the Navy, if they wanted to spy on you and you're only using Tor, there are vulnerabilities in Tor that could expose you. So most people, everyone suggests that you run both. If you're going to do anything crazy, you should run Tor and you should run a VPN at the same time to get fully anonymous. And I've done both. And to do things, especially going on the dark web and things like that, if anyone goes there, you need to run both. Don't just run Tor browser. So why a VPN would be better than Tor is that when you run a Tor browser, it's basically like Firefox, right? It's like Google Chrome. And so everything on that browser goes through Tor. However, a VPN is on all internet traffic. And so that's why it's better to have a VPN over Tor, is that every piece of data is encrypted, but through Tor, only what you search through gets encrypted. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And if you want to take it a step up, let's say you don't want to pay for a VPN, then you should run a Linux system on your computer. Just get a flash drive, get a 16-gigabyte flash drive, and run Tails or another one called Unix. I've run Tails before. I have a Mac, and it was pretty easy to set up. And so I ran Tails. And what Tails is that it's a Linux operating system that you boot separately from your Mac or your Windows or whatever. And you do everything through there. And the whole browser is running through Tor. So not just the whole operating system is running through Tor. And so running a VPN through that is complicated and not really necessary. but that's another way that you can get protected online, especially when you're doing searches and things like that. Now, doing like running Linux tails is like really excessive, and I would only suggest you do that if you're doing things on the internet that you really don't want to be tracked on, But if you're just going to search for socks to go shop on Amazon, it's not really necessary. Like I said, things about Googling stuff about the government or about activism and secure communications, then it's probably an option you want to look into. So those are 3 kind of basic options to protect you while you're searching online, which is number 1, get a VPN. Number 2, run Tor. Number 3, run both Tor and a VPN. And number 3, look into Linux tails and run that off a flash drive. That's called a live OS, running a live OS. So those are kind of 3 ways for basically searching on the internet. As far as like mobile communications, I looked in that as well. And that's just a whole, another can of worms. But basically, I was looking into this thing called an IMSI catcher or a stingray. And a lot of us know about that because we've heard about it before, how the police use them to monitor your communications and things like that. And so and it's like, it's mobile networks are very different than how the internet works. And so basically what I found out was that the FBI gets a hold of these devices, and they've been the ones who sell these to police departments. And the police departments have been using these to actually, they were supposed to use it for terrorism and all that kind of stuff, but of course they use it for not just drug busts, but absolutely useless things. There was a guy, I can't remember the story anymore, but there was a guy who stole a purse or a bike. It was something like really stupid, and they actually used the stingray to monitor his information, and they used it in court against him. And then the lawyers were trying to figure out how they knew all this stuff, and they were basically able to convince the judge to not reveal that information. And so the government the police departments have used the courts to shield how exactly they're collecting your data. And what I really wanted to talk about are on top of searching the internet with encryption and stuff like that is metadata. And metadata is the killer when it comes to figuring out who you are and doxing people, especially from the government. So when I talk about metadata, if me and you have a conversation and someone's listening on it, they're listening to all the words we say and they're getting a whole story and a narrative and things like that. What metadata is, how that's different is that basically they can see that I'm on the internet talking to you for a certain period of time, but they don't know what we're actually talking about. Yeah. So
metadata is just like I just wanted to mention, metadata is just like the connection between two points of information. It's not the content of the information itself.
Right. And there's so many fascinating stories about this, because I was watching another story today about how the CIA was using metadata to track terrorists. Yeah. And if you want to know how the government is using that, just go Google stories about that and you'll find a ton of great stuff. Just to explain that, like basically for drone strikes, the US military and CIA, they're not using on the ground assets to find out which target they have to kill. So like when it comes to this idea of targeted killing, they're not really targeted, but they're not sending like assets on the ground. What they're doing is tracking cell phone metadata to look at patterns of behavior in order to analyze, like, okay, based on these patterns of behavior, this person's affiliated with like Al Qaeda or ISIS, and that's usually the information that they're using to conduct drone strikes or any kind of quote unquote targeted killing. And that's all like through like the NSA helps them with that. The NSA, like that's really the NSA specialty is tracking that kind of information. It's like cell phone metadata can tell you a lot about a person's day-to-day activities without actually even going into text, which gets into the whole like surveillance debate, because some people are like, well, they're not reading your text messages, they're just looking at metadata. Well, metadata,
though they can also just kind of
right.
That's what, I don't know if that's the stingray or what it is, but they can, especially like if everyone has their phone together at a protest, they can just, kind of sweep down and scoop up every single text message anyone is sending. Right.
Yeah.
At a protest, that's why I want to, if it's not encrypted.
That's what I want to get into too, is that the MG catcher, what people think it is like, oh, they can listen in on your calls on which message you're sending, but that's not it. What they need is your IMSI or your IMSI. And when they have that, they've got that permanent backdoor to your phone. And so just like what Peter said, they're scooping up all these IMSIs at once. And then once they have that, they pretty much have access to your metadata and things, and even your messages. They can send you messages too if you wanted to as well.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple hackers who've built their own MZ catcher and able to do exactly what the Stingray can do, which is also pretty scary too. Another crazy thing is that the phone companies knew about this, and they basically left the door open so the government could do what it needed to do. So the phone companies know, and it runs on your SIM card. Your SIM card is the culprit about this because it runs this weak encryption or basically unencrypted. So like when you send a message through your mobile phone, it goes to a cell tower, and the cell tower has to authenticate that you're a paying customer before it passes the data on. And so pretty much that permission is basically unencrypted, and it's pretty wide open. And that's what's used for the police to pretty much get into your phone. And so the phone companies could encrypt that, and there's actually a way around that. You can get an encrypted SIM. There are several places to buy some of those. There's also running a Linux phone as well. But anyway, so there's kind of no way around that situation besides doing the extreme measures, which is leaving your phone at home, taking the SIM card out, or running an encrypted SIM card, which is not offered by the major phone carriers. So that was the kind of insidious part about that. And going back to the story I was saying earlier, there was a group of spies in Italy who were spying on Muslim assets, or whatever you want to call it. And basically, it's a funny story because these CIA people, they didn't use their phones properly. And the Italian authorities noticed a bunch of these inconsistencies with these people in their country. And so, and then a man disappeared. The CIA kidnapped a man in Italy. Italian authorities looked into it, and they realized that these were CIA agents doing operations in their country, which was illegal at the time. So the CIA was using these cell towers to catch terrorists, or supposed terrorists, and the Italian authorities used cell towers to catch the CIA agents and capture them. And then you also had Hezbollah in Lebanon know about this, and they also exposed all the CIA assets in Lebanon because they watched the CIA's cell traffic. And so it's like this. It's incredibly ironic.
Yeah, and I also want to clarify, like, especially when it comes to these, whenever you hear a report of like, a drone strike killed 12 like militants or terrorists. The thing about metadata is that you can't really prove definitively that the person you killed is an actual terrorist. You're just assuming based on metadata tracking, but it was like there was that long
and
story.
Military age men,
right? And they're and so and so like also with stories on the ground, when it comes to drone strikes, oftentimes what will happen is that because a lot of people on the ground know that their SIM cards are being targeted, what they'll do is they'll take out the SIM card and switch them out. So or it's like it could be like, okay, like someone maybe just lends their phone to someone else, but then because the CIA and U.S. military was tracking that phone, they would send a strike and kill that person. So it's like that's the thing is, especially when you read stories about quote unquote targeted killing, like they aren't always getting the right people. Like they're determining who the right person is based on just metadata. But the thing is, like, they can easily spin like, hey, this program's successful because we killed X number of militants using this algorithm. And it just kind of, perpetuates the need, I guess, to,
That's Robert McNamara all over again.
It is. Pretty much, yeah. It's just if McNamara had, like, access to computers and cell phones, that's pretty much what he would do. Yeah, it's very simple.
So yeah, I want to kind of draw some things out, which is that, like, sometimes, and look, I'm the first one to say I've been really sloppy about this stuff, and it has kind of, maybe constrained my actions or something. I'm not, we're not promoting anyone commit any illegal activity on this podcast. It's just so everyone is clear. But, as things to understand, which is that, like, what kind of surveillance powers does your local police department have versus, like, what kinds does the federal government have, and, what makes them get involved in certain things. So, I think probably maybe, like, the NYPD and the LAPD may have the advanced, like, encryption hacking technology, but they're not going to use that necessarily on everyone. You have to be like a high value target for them to for it to go up to that level of the food chain. And, right now, local activists, of course, they are surveilling and watching anyone who appears publicly. I mean, they videotape every protest. They run any uncovered face. They run everyone's faces through facial recognition softwares.
Yeah.
So those are all things, that's kind of what was funny about this time around, was that like, oh, now everyone's allowed to wear a mask. So it kind of helped things out. And yeah, they can call Verizon or Comcast or Spectrum or whoever. And if you aren't using a VPN, like Spectrum, your internet provider, like I'm not sure for how long, but they do keep a record of basically everything you've browsed, and I think maybe even in private mode. So,
and what makes that really scary, besides they have to get a warrant, I believe, to do that part, as far as like getting communications from your provider. However, with the MZ catcher and stuff like that, we're talking about a lot of gray area and warrantless tapping, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, and also like this is relevant, but like we talked about, I think last month, about the bill. I don't know if it was got to Trump's desk yet, but like there is the reauthorization for the Patriot Act, and there is an amendment proposed to basically. I think Mitch McConnell wanted to expand the surveillance powers of the FBI to look at your search browser history, and there is an amendment in the bill to basically curtail giving the FBI that power. Now the thing is, like with these agencies, like if it's not the FBI looking at it, it's probably the NSA, and so it's like,
and it's important to even understand. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's cool.
It's important to understand like how the NSA surveils things and their kind of definition of surveillance. So what the NSA actually does is they kind of just hook a giant splitter cable to like the main cables that like contain all the internet traffic, like the ones that go across the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, or in San Francisco at the AT&T headquarters, there's, I don't remember the name of the room, but there is a doorless room, and in that is basically just like a giant splitter, and that just gets sent to like the NSA servers, and they just basically run a copy of the internet. I mean, the NSA like main data facility in DC literally has its own power plant. That's how much data, but that's too much for any human being to look at. So they do that, then they run it through algorithms. And of course, you better believe that they have an algorithm for BLM, black identity extremism, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So, as we mentioned earlier, an organizer I followed on Instagram, on one of his stories. In Columbus, he posted a picture of the Columbus City budget, and it was flagged as potentially false information. So these, and that's Instagram has these algorithms. So everyone has these algorithms, but the NSA doesn't consider it surveilled until a human being looks at the results of that. So they have everything, but because a human being hasn't looked at it, it doesn't count in their definition of it being of that person being surveilled. So that's important to understand. And I don't remember specifically, but I think there was a while back where it was they don't need the FBI still needs a warrant to tap your phone, but what they don't necessarily need a warrant to do, depending on the company, is ask Google or Amazon for all the recorded stuff that you've spoken and that they record.
Right.
Those companies are pretty compliant. We'll see. They like to put up a front about how we value your data and privacy, but at the end of the day, they're not going to go against the government, to protect the privacy of their users. They're not going to risk anything.
Especially the iPhones and stuff. You guys got to get rid of those immediately, because it's just gotten worse and worse as far as what you can, because it makes Android a better choice in this day and age is you just have options to protect yourself. So like one of the things is like Wi-Fi scanning. So to figure out where you are at any point in time, your phones are constantly searching for Wi-Fi networks, and then within 6 feet with Wi-Fi triangulation, we can figure out exactly where you are. And so you can turn your GPS off, but that's really not enough because your Wi-Fi can still ping and scan. Now, if you have an Android device, you can go in your settings and turn Wi-Fi scanning off. iOS, you can't do that at all. And so, and iOS keeps limiting how much you can manipulate the OS or this operating system. And then at least with an Android phone, on some phones, you can wipe Android off and then install Linux. Which makes it more, so you have more control.
Rooting your phone is something that you should not do lightly because you can mess it up.
You can break the phone
and turn it into a brick. But
with iOS, it gets worse and worse. And so if you have an iPhone, don't look to upgrade to another iPhone. Make that switch to Android. And a couple things too, Peter and Adam, I wanted to say earlier about when you search in the internet through the laptop and stuff like that, is browser fingerprinting. And so basically, and if you mentioned this early, Peter, you mentioned this early as well, depending on who you are, you're going to have a different plan of action for OpSec. So if I'm a fugitive on the run, I'm going to have a completely different plan than a soccer mom in Montana, right? And so figure out who you are in this big web of the internet and world and what your position is, and then make a plan according to that. So like how secure should you be and all that kind of stuff depends on what you're doing. And so like browser fingerprinting is another good thing to think about too. So when you're searching for stuff on the internet, Google Chrome should be only used for basically shopping. And that's what I kind of use Google Chrome to do, is to shop and maybe to use Twitter or something like that. Just because, so like I said, I'm running a Mac and Linux and things like that, but mostly Mac, and a lot of websites just happen to work better on Chrome. And that's when I have Chrome for, or just really light stuff that doesn't really compromise who I am. Anything that I want private, that includes looking up health questions, mental health questions, pornography, any kind of things like that, you want to move off of Google, off of Safari. You want to go to Firefox, or there's a lot of other private browsers that you want to go to. But open up Firefox, open the private tab, and then search through there. Anything that can prove who you are, you do not want to use through a regular browser like Safari or Chrome. And also, when we go into our websites, have a dedicated browser for depending on what you want to do. And then disinformation is another part of OpSec. You always want to have different names, different birth dates, and you want to lie on as many social media accounts as you can. And it's kind of funny because I was kind of like hip to this back when I was a teenager, when Facebook first came out, because I changed my name and everybody got confused on Facebook when I took my legal name off, and they didn't understand it. And it turns out that was probably the smartest thing I could have done. Now everybody does it because it's obvious what Zuck is doing and how your identity can be completely compromised. And doxing people, the easiest way to do that is through Facebook. I can do a reverse image search with facial recognition, and it will take me back to your Facebook profile, and that's all I need. And then my mom actually got stalked on Facebook. It was a crazy story. Like she told me the story of some woman that she hadn't seen in 35 years came up to her workplace. Now she doesn't, and this is a completely different city. And she says, I saw you on Facebook and I saw that you worked here. And she wanted to have this conversation with my mom. My mom was just like creeped out. Like, lady, I haven't seen you in 30 years. You haven't called me. Like, I don't know who you are. You just randomly show up at my workplace. So once again, all this stuff comes back to what you're putting out there online. So on my accounts, I have fake names, multiple birth dates, and multiple places, where I was born. So when someone does try to look you up, you want to have a lot of confusion. And when you search on the internet, even with a VPN, you are creating somewhat of a profile. But when you obscure stuff through a VPN, when you're using different browsers, when you're using different names and birth dates, you're confusing the AI as far as who you are. And so when someone does want to search you, or a third party does want to search to sell your data, it's pretty much unusable. And so think about those two things too. When you're searching the internet, have multiple browsers, put fake information out there, and LinkedIn, get rid of it. I'm going to delete mine pretty soon as well. If you want to get a job and things like that, just work on your resume and then send that in. But I think those are two things I forgot to mention, and that's going to happen a lot. I'm going to jump back and forth to all the stuff I forgot to say earlier. I didn't mean to cut you guys off.
No, that's important. And also, like, especially when, we're already a little bit over an hour, but I just want to add particularly about Google and Amazon, because these companies are basically, I mean, people will nitpick about, well, it's not actually a monopoly, blah, blah, blah. But like for the most part, like these companies are virtual monopolies in terms of how much
Right.
they control the flow of internet traffic. So, and that's their business model. Like their business model is to make money off of selling information. I mean, there's this phrase that I think is useful. Like, you know, if it doesn't cost anything to use Google or Facebook, that's because you're the product, right?
Yeah.
Like you each of us who use social media, we are the product for these companies like Google, Facebook. I mean, obviously, you have to pay for stuff on Amazon, but like, you know, Amazon pretty much is like, they are just making bank right now with this pandemic, because since it's, you know, because of the shutdown, everyone's been having to order stuff from Amazon. And by the way, when it comes to ordering stuff online, just stay away from Amazon. Try to support other distributors.
Exactly.
You know, my dad's an Amazon worker. You know, and also the treatment of Amazon workers is pretty shitty, especially with the pay and stuff. But yeah, like these companies, like, I just to wrap up on this point, but like, because they are basically monopolies, their business model is predicated on selling your information, and they're pretty much working hand in hand with the government to steal your information, basically.
Yeah. And I want to zero in on, you know, the idea that like, oh, well, the private companies, yes, they collect all your data, but it's just to sell you ads or something. And therefore it seems like creepy but anodyne. No, the government can then just go and be like, I want the data profile on this person.
Exactly.
And then they get to basically learn everything you've done. So, you know, some of this stuff is like, on some level I've kind of accepted it, you know, because I've been not careful about a lot of things, you know, and part of me just wants to see like what the government would try to bring up if they ever tried to arrest me or whatever. But
and I think, yes, keep going.
But it is, you know, for people who value their safety more than I do, it's important to understand that running stuff that prevents that kind of mass amount of data accumulation is also like for security. And, you know, anyone who is organizing against police brutality in their communities are being watched by the police. Absolutely, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they can, depending on, you know, how much trouble you make, they may kick you up, you know, to higher levels, or, you know, put you under more surveillance. Because, you know, they need a warrant to tap your phone, but I'm pretty sure they don't need a warrant for like the metadata of your call logs to get that from like your phone company. No, they can just ask the phone company, and, you know, the phone company 9 times out of 10 will give it to them, because they don't care about you, and then they get to see basically who you called and for how long. One thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, people talk about Signal a lot as like an encrypted messaging platform that, you know, activists and organizers use. I guess in your estimation, how safe is that, and how important is it to use the Signal?
I'm on the Signal. I'm on the Signal bandwagon now. I kind of hated it because it was like annoying having 2 different sets of like messaging, because I had, you know, some stuff would come to me, and then to my regular messaging platform, and then some stuff would just go straight to Signal, and it was really annoying as fuck. But I have Signal now on my laptop, and that's what I mostly use it now. I kind of don't use it that much on my phone, but Signal it's good. And from the research that I've gathered, it's probably the most secure. It's more secure than email, because, well, that's a caveat to that. It's more secure than email in a way that email can leak your email. Email can leak your IP address, excuse me. So even email address can leak your IP address, which is a problem. And of course, with these companies running these big servers, that store your emails, if the government wanted to request your email, they could take that off the company. But with Signal, like I said, everything's encrypted, and so you have that layer of protection. The problem with Signal, the only huge vulnerability is with linking to your phone number. So if you can set up with a Google number or get that encrypted SIM card. I mean, my cell phone is a Huawei. It's the Chinese phone.
Oh, nice. I have a Huawei too. They're great phones,
nice.
actually.
Yeah, so I have the dual SIM thing, and right, you could have one SIM you have a secure SIM running a number that's only for Signal. So that's the only problem with Signal is that you don't have to link it to your cell phone number. You don't have to do that, but I did it the wrong way, and I'm trying to figure out how to get that off and then use another number. Yeah. So that's the only downside, but Signal should be okay. I know a lot of people talking about Slack. Slack government records can be requested off of Slack. That has been done, but as far as like the government request to remove data from Slack, there hasn't been a lot of that, but I know that's going to increase pretty soon. So, I mean, if you're just talking about regular stuff, I wouldn't worry about Slack too much. But I keep everything on Signal, especially about the operations, the street medics, future actions.
Anything that's coordinating directions or actions or like telling people where to go. That's the stuff that needs to be encrypted. Also, if people didn't know, Zoom recently came out and said that the reason they're not encrypting their calls is because they want, future FBI contracts. So Zoom is very, very not good.
So I want to, a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece in Alternate about how Google and big tech companies help the U.S. war machine. I want to pull up some quotes from sources I talked to. One guy, Robert Steele, he's a former Marine and CIA case officer, but now he's like an advocate of open source intelligence. And he was talking, so Signal, what all the stuff we're talking about is called signal intelligence. So there's different types of intelligence gathering. There's human intelligence, which is spies. Yeah. Signal intelligence is largely having to do with like electronics, anything with an electronic signal. And so what Robert Steele told me, I'm going to put the piece in the show notes. He said, signals intelligence has always relied primarily on seeing the dots and connecting the dots, not on knowing what the dots are saying. When combined with the history of the dots, and particularly the dots coming together in meetings, or a black anonymous cell phone residing next to a white known cell phone, such that the black acquires a white identity by extension, it becomes possible to map human activity in relation to weapons caches, mosques, meetings, etc. So that's why the military, this is a lot of like this stuff we're talking about, a lot of it has to do for the military purpose, interest of the U.S. war machine. And so what Steele said, this is actually important because it relates to what we're talking about. He said the only advantage to signals intelligence is that it's very, very expensive and leaves a lot of money on the table for pork and overhead, which means like it's an advantage for these tech companies. And then Captain Michael Cairns, he's a former SEER instructor, and he also has been critical of the U.S. torture program. He also I'm gonna say this quote because what he said I think was very revealing. He said, "Back in the day when the world was analog, every signal was one signal. Some signals contained a broad band of information contained within. However, there were no data packets embedded within the electromagnetic spectrum. Therefore, collecting a signal or phone conversation was largely the task of capturing, decoding, processing some specifically targeted singular source. Today, welcome to the digital era. Data packets flow as if like water." So it's like the internet, with pieces and parts of all things upstream contained within. Therefore, the task today for a digital society is largely one of collecting everything, so as to fully unwrap and exploit the totality of the captured data in an almost exploratory manner. And therein lies the apparent inherently unconstitutionalness of wholesale collection of data. It's almost like pre-crime. So it's basically like Minority Report. Because the government and companies can be able to map your activity, they can predict what you're going to do. So this is basically like Philip K. Dick's Minority Report, is being able to predict what kind of criminal or activity you're going to do to make it seem like it's justified to arrest you and take away your rights. So I wanted to mention those quotes because they are very applicable to what we are talking about and the stakes of what we're talking about.
And I want to say too as well, we had a prominent lawyer here in Columbus who was in a lawsuit with the Columbus Police Department, and in the Columbus Police Department's files against them, they found Xerox copies of the lawyer's Twitter account. So they were going to the lawyer's Twitter feed, or social media and copying everything just to gather intel on the lawyer. And so it had nothing to do with the case, but, it was being collected.
Well, social media is just wiretapping yourself. I mean, you like anything that is publicly available on social media. Yeah. If you're someone who's spoken out against the police or anything like that, the police almost definitely have a file on you. And you brought up the difference between signal intelligence and human intelligence, and that is also important because, COINTELPRO type programs use both. I mean, part of it is, tapping your phone, but part of it is also, rats and provocateurs and all that fun stuff they did and still do. And, it works together. So it's not like protecting one is going to protect you from the other. It's, the kind of security culture that is also necessary, online relates to the kind of ways you have to operate and move, in meet space, let's say, and, with people. And because it's all about finding the network. It's all about like what counterintelligence programs, what surveillance programs are after is social networks. And that's why social media is so is just a dream for them, because it's like before they would have to go to track down people's high school graduation yearbooks and stuff and try to figure out who met who, when, and where, and all that stuff. And now Facebook will tell you've known this person for 10 years or whatever, and and here are all the photos you took together. So it's important to not let that deter you, because I think a lot of people, and I think especially like the earlier parts of our generation and I guess maybe Gen Xers or something, there was this there's this constant paranoia where it's like we couldn't really speak because we knew we were being watched, and therefore we didn't want to say anything too heavy or radical. But I think people have just gotten to the point where they kind of don't care, or just like as if the feds are going to watch, let them watch. Let's give them something to watch is sometimes how I've approached it. It's like, but as sort of as the movement matures and we start to get more serious about, militant action, like this stuff does become really important, because they can, the last thing you want to do is be a sucker and advertise to them what it is that you're doing. One of the reasons that this whole uprising, caught such fire literally so quickly is that nobody knew what was happening. Like the liberal nonprofits or the people whose job it is to monitor these activists and kind of keep them, on the straight and narrow and the legalistic route and all that stuff. They had not, they got caught slipping. And, I think it's pretty clear to say like that there, at least in Minneapolis, there was coordination with like, perhaps underground, anarchist groups and stuff like that, which is good, which needs to happen. But, part of that is like, at the very least, making that, because if every police department has to like bust out the big guns of surveillance, like that eventually is something that they have to actually ask Congress for. Like they have to approve the money. They can't just do that with dark money. At that point, it then becomes like a recognition of this as a, domestic security threat. And that's something that, then has to be discussed publicly. And so, the more, the harder we make it for them, the more that we can push because, because part of it is exactly that. Not once they get to the point where it's like, okay, well, we have to actually crush these people. It can't just be outside agitators or something. Then they have to sort of name organizations and destroy them. And that's something, like the Patriot Act, they can do all the covert stuff they want to. That's, the Constitution never has meant anything, really. But the thing about the Patriot Act is that it empowered these agencies to, create more massive sweeping programs that they, openly didn't have to be accountable for because they're empowered to do it. And so that's, all of it relates to like the technical capability and, the political capability to pull off this kind of stuff because, Americans don't like the concept, but they can be willing to go along with it if the enemy is scary enough. But I think one of the things we saw in the past 2 weeks, because certainly there were people who were ready to roll tanks, and there were a couple of times where I was like, "Oh shit, it's over now." I mean, they're gonna start doing it, Pinochet style, and we're not quite there yet, but I mean, the way everything's going, it's only a matter of time, I think.
Yeah,
it starts to get real bad.
They've been running the test grounds for a while now, because I mentioned before we had the couple court cases that I think happened in Baltimore with the police using the MZ Catch on people. So these are low profile people who had no protection and they got railroaded by this technology. And then with this current crackdown on undocumented people, you've had ICE using these stingrays a lot to triangulate people's locations and round them up as well. So the government has been using these technologies a lot, but they've been using it on people who can't really do too much about it. And so the training has already been put in place. I mean, they're ready to roll this stuff out full time. And then you brought up the Patriot Act, which brings us back to the Antifa problem, which is labeling everyone an Antifa terrorist, right?
Yeah.
So now the gloves really come off, right? And then you have this thing called the Earn It Act, which has been introduced. I don't know if it's gotten through the Senate yet. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but this is a new piece of legislation that's trying to supposedly crack down on child predators. But what it really is, it's a cover up to break all encryption. So they're trying to make encryption illegal because they're saying that, child predators can go on the dark web and solicit children, but they're encrypted. But that's the cover up for it. The real truth is that if they do this, we can't use encryption at all. And so I hope it doesn't pass. I mean, this really could be the death nail for all this stuff. But like Peter said, I mean, the tanks are coming in one way or another, either physically or virtually. So we really got to be on our P's and Q's.
Yeah. And also on top of that, the New York State Supreme Court, this was, I think, 2 weeks ago. So there is a petition seeking, this is from Common Dreams, there is a petition seeking the immediate release of hundreds of protesters who had been held by NYPD for more than 24 hours. And which is basically like, if you hold people for more than 24 hours, that's getting into indefinite detention, basically. The New York State Supreme Court rejected that petition, which basically means that it's okay to indefinitely detain protesters. This is in New York, and this is a pretty, damning precedent. But like, this is also in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, like there is a similar provision that allowed for indefinite detention of American citizens. Indefinite detention, that's something that's getting into my sort of forte when it comes to Guantanamo. That's one of the things that always made Guantanamo so odious, is holding people indefinitely without charging them or trying them. Like, so, because you're not supposed to hold people without charging or trying them. You can hold them temporarily, but not indefinitely. So basically, Guantanamo is that. And so now, like, we're seeing, basically, like, think of it this way, like, a lot of the violence that gets externalized overseas comes back home and vice versa, right? The same kind of tactics of suppression and violence and surveillance that get basically tested overseas against overseas enemies wind up coming back internally to use against internal enemies. So you see it the same with the perfection of signals intelligence used overseas. Well, it comes back here when it comes to surveilling, black people and activists, and it's just a whole history of this. But yeah, I agree. It's important to be on our P's and Q's on this.
Yeah, and something also to drive home, specifically with as it relates to Guantanamo and indefinite detention, was, I think it was mostly Cheney behind this, creating the concept of terrorists as unlawful combatants. And by doing that they are saying, I mean, I don't know if the UN agrees, but their argument is that as unlawful combatants, the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to them. So
pretty much, yeah. It's a separate, they were trying to create basically a separate category of quote unquote enemy that it's okay to basically, go outside of any sort of international human rights protection that's available. One thing that is helpful, because we're getting close to the end, and I want to actually bring some good news, is that, so basically what's been really interesting, especially as a Pan-Africanist, is there's been a lot of solidarity in the African diaspora and the African continent. There have been a lot of protests throughout Africa, like in Nigeria, Kenya. The government of Ghana actually laid out a memorial for George Floyd. And so there was, I think, a petition by, representatives of the Floyd family, but so... apparently, the UN Human Rights Council has decided, this is from an NPR article, to hold an urgent debate on racism and police brutality in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd. And the proposal was led by pretty much the entire African continent, and it was led by Burkina Faso, which connects to Thomas Sankara, who this podcast is named after. And so basically, the UN Human Rights Council is going to hold essentially an urgent debate on systemic racism in the United States. I'll pull up the actual letter. Hold on, let me find it, because I think it's really important. Okay, yeah. So there was a letter that essentially let me find it. Okay, yeah. So the Burkina Faso ambassador to the UN said that the death of George Floyd is unfortunately not an isolated incident, with many previous cases of unarmed persons of African descent suffering the same fate due to unchecked police brutality. And it says, the main aim of the urgent dialogue is to address the structural and proximate causes of racial discrimination that prevails worldwide, with tremendous impact on the enjoyment of human rights, especially by people of African descent. And so, according to Al Jazeera, this call for a debate at the UN, it basically, Floyd's family, along with families of other police violence victims and several, I think it says more than 600 NGOs, I guess, basically, petitioned the UN Human Rights Council to have this debate. So the world is watching, and
bad.
Yeah, but I do think it is heartening to see this level of global solidarity that throughout the global Black family, to see this kind of solidarity and be able to petition to UN. I mean, we'll see what the UN does. I mean, the UN is obviously far, far, far from perfect, but I think that kind of global solidarity can offer a counterweight to systemic racism.
I mean, what's true about, let's say asymmetrical warfare, any of that kind of stuff, anti-colonial situations, is that certainly there can be a highly developed repressive apparatus of the state that wants you to think that it's everywhere and can do everything, right? But the way you get around that is through, international solidarity, when the actions of that repressive state apparatus then become an international problem, and such that that country can't then go about its normal business. I mean, in the same way, then it eventually does have to do something about that problem in a constructive way. So, these are, trying to have like a positive message through all the kind of scary stuff that we're putting out there, because it's important that people understand the truth about this stuff, but also you shouldn't let it paralyze you, because this is a global movement, and we have to remember that.
Yeah, right. And the African Union, I think I said this before, but I'll say it again. Black America is basically a member of the 6th region of the African Union. So the 6th region, in addition to the 5 regions that the African Union represents, which, so Northern Africa, Western Africa, Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa, like those are the 5 regions on the continent. The 6th region is the African diaspora. So, we can't just look at Black identity and Black liberation just as it's confined to the U.S. territory and U.S. borders. Like, we are a part of an actual global Black community, and like that can offer hope, I think. It offers me hope. It's something that's like, okay, we don't have to just sort of be in this like kind of David and Goliath fight, like with Black America versus the machinery and strength of the U.S. state. Like, we do have muscle we can flex, and it's time for us to flex it. And like international global solidarity, that's really important, and that's helped before, and I think it should help again. And I just want to, especially since we started on such a very sad and grim story, there is room for hope. Not the Obama hope, not that hope.
I don't say hope. I say resolve.
Resolve.
Letting it strengthen your resolve. I'm done with hope.
Yeah. Thanks, Obama.
Right, you ruined everything.
Yeah. Tron, do you got any last words before we get out of here?
I'll just kind of run down these points a little bit. It's just, make sure that you're putting a lot of disinformation out there to keep yourself safe. Use a fake name on social media, fake birthday. Don't put your picture up there. Take them down. Take all your pictures off social media. Now, Instagram is a little bit different. I do have a business account on Instagram, so that's I expect to be a public figure in that respect. But just when you're talking about personal things, depersonalize those as much as possible.
Yeah.
Have multiple browsers set up for multiple different uses, different things. Get a VPN. Get even more secure. Run Tor and VPN. Get rid of iPhones. And I think, there's other stuff we didn't talk about, but we've covered enough. The basic stuff is there. And for your phones and all that kind of stuff too, there's no way around the Stingray except for getting rid of your SIM card and things like that. And I know a lot of people have talked about should you record protests and things like that. Personally, I think if there's nothing illegal happening, I do try not to get people's faces, but that's kind of your discretion. If I just want to show a large group of people, I don't think there's too much in harm in that. But we can talk about that if you guys want to before we close out.
Yeah, I just want to mention before we close out with the faces, because I do think that's important. In 2014, 2015, there were a lot of Black Lives Matter activists who just wound up dead in very, very suspicious circumstances. And some of those people were people who were photographed. So I do think it's important to, when you're taking pictures of people, to black out their face or just be very, very careful, because we don't.
Right. The danger with that isn't necessarily the police, because like I said, the police are recording all of it. So any protest, the police have recordings of. But the fascists, the Nazis, they can use that stuff for doxing purposes and targeting purposes.
Yeah.
And it's not in any, I don't know if we made mention of the 5 black men that have been found in nooses, but they're not. I don't really believe they were suicides. And we are in a place where aside from the police, there are far right fascist groups, white supremacist groups that are just targeting and killing black people now. So
yeah,
you know,
there were a couple nooses found in Oakland hanging off of trees in Lake Merritt. And just recently, Mayor Libby Schaaf of Oakland said that they're going to be investigating those as hate crimes. But yeah, like there was I think like 5 black men who were just found hanging, and I do not believe that those were suicides at all. So these are very the protests are inspiring, but it's like it's very important to stay safe. And these are very, very intense times, and it's important to stay frosty.
And Google yourself too while you're at it. Just go ahead and Google yourself, see what you can dig up, and see how deep it goes. And I think that'll kind of get you to see how deep this thing is.
Yeah. Stay safe, but also stay dangerous.
Yes, and keep the faith.
That's right.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Thank you, Tron.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
All right.
This is really good.
Yeah. All right.
I'll see you later.
All right. Later.